We are live on YouTube. Let me go ahead and just make sure we're recording on the computer. It says we're recording. This is Male Entrepreneur Podcast, episode number 124, I believe. And we are live in 3, 2. All right. Welcome back to the Male Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep, how you doing today, man?
Doing awesome, man. Couldn't be better. Weather's rocking. It's super hot. Maybe a little bit too hot right now. My grass is actually getting burnt outside. It's funny. It's funny. One of the things that I take pride in my yard, and right now it just looks like crap. So every time I pull into the driveway and I just look at the front and I look at the back, I'm just like, oh god. So looking for some rain here these days, man.
I didn't think it got that hot in Canada.
Oh, it gets hot. It definitely gets hot. I don't know if we ever get. Nah, you know what? Yeah, I don't know if we ever get the Florida heat, but it does get hot. So we typically where I am, it's going to be what 30 to 33 degrees Celsius today. Where I grew up, it can get up to 38 degrees Celsius. So 38 Celsius to Fahrenheit is 100.
Holy cow.
So it can get hot.
My ignorant, bigoted view of Canada is people wearing like the hats with the flaps that cover their ears and mittens and just being cold all year round. When you say it's hot enough to burn the grass, I'm just like, that doesn't sound like Canada at all.
Yeah, man, it is. Well, it's different in winter. Just put it that way. Just be prepared. Well, you come from a cold area in the winter too, right?
Yeah, we live in the mountain. Well, I live right next to the mountain, so it gets cold and it snows a lot and it gets cold, but not cold enough to where like your car won't start. I have friends that live in other areas of the US, and it gets so cold that their cars won't start in the winter. They have to take special precautions and warm their garage up before they try and warm their car up. And
Yeah, you
you
got
have
to
to
plug
go
in the car and stuff like yeah, that happens in Canada as well. Quite often, actually. There's places where you go outside and you can't even breathe because it's just like your snot freezes to your nose and it's so cold.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. What a weird way to start the episode. What are we going to be talking about today?
I know we go on these total tangents, right? Well, we're just talking about the different buckets in life. And a lot of these topics we're probably going to be talking about over the next few weeks are stemming from the topics that I'm talking about in my next book. Uh, and in particular, because I'm seeing a lot of, man, I can't even say it. If I say it openly right now, it's just, it saddens me to see how many guys are actually struggling in life right now. And I don't know if it's just COVID, but just in general, man. And I'm a pretty optimistic person, right? That's part of my job as well. And I always look on the good side of things. But man, it's just 8 out of 10 guys that I'm running into on average, roughly, I would say, are just having a real tough time with life. They're just not, it's not even that they're struggling, but they're not feeling you could say the passion for life. They don't feel that aliveness. And especially with some of my clients over the last little bit, and I've just kind of broken it down to really, the 3 buckets of life. And something actually hit me from an aha moment. Kind of knew this before, but it was one of those repeat aha moments that it's one or more of these buckets just isn't at the level where it needs to be, or they're just basically living in one bucket altogether. And then the other 2 buckets are pretty much non-existent.
So before we jump into those, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Society has gone through some major changes lately. A lot of people are feeling despair. A lot of people are feeling hopelessness. And I don't know how it is in Canada, but here in the States, especially with some of my clients, we've watched the government pick and choose who's allowed to stay open for business. We've watched Walmart is allowed to sell shoes, but mom and pop shoe stores are not allowed to sell shoes. And we've watched a lot of people be told the rent is still due for your brick and mortar store, but you're not allowed to have customers. And so for guys, entrepreneurial guys, and people like us who tend to have an upbeat, hopeful look at the future, it's been 4 or 5 months now. And maybe it's not so bad in Canada, but we've also got to deal with the fact that now there's a bunch of maybe well-intended but also slightly ignorant teenagers running through a bunch of our cities, burning businesses down, smashing windows, and a lot of that hope that we had for the future. And we're being told, uh, and it feels like it's almost become political now too. It feels like it's um, we don't want the economy to be strong when the election happens. So because a strong economy might mean another 4 years of Trump. So let's just do everything we can to keep the economy down for the next 5 months. And business owners here, at least, are like, there's not very much to be hopeful about. And we're walking around with masks. We can't see each other smile. We can't hug each other. We can't shake each other's hands. It's hard to be hopeful when the whole world has changed so much in the last couple of months.
Yeah, really, really good point. So just people in general, the whole, you could say the vibe of the world right now is a challenge and it's a struggle. And I'm a strong believer of energy and it's a trickle effect because the world is at just a low when it comes to energy overall, and that's going to impact us as individuals. And so if what you just talked about is really interesting because I stopped watching the news actually a few weeks ago and I just completely shut it down. Honestly, it was probably the best thing I ever did. But I can tell you because you know what, there's stuff out there on the news, there's theories out there, but we're facing the same challenges in Canada as well, right? We're facing the same challenges where some businesses are allowed to, Walmart's open, others are not. And so that's that. I think when it comes to those theories, I think there might be some validity to it from your political landscape, but other countries are facing the same thing. Right now, we're not in the middle of elections, but we're going through the same challenges. In fact, if we take a look at what's happened, Canada's our numbers have actually dropped. We're doing fairly well, right? I don't know if you heard. My wife was telling me that Europe opened up the borders to Canada and a number of other countries, but not the U.S. because the U.S. hasn't been able to control their numbers yet. But I think it's because we were just a little bit more mindful here as well. I think people just really buckled up and said, we got to do this together. People were very respectful of each other. We didn't have those riots. We had a few of those protests. But yeah, they were facing the same thing. There's some businesses that just weren't able to open up, but you got the Walmarts, right? Like you said. So people, yeah, business owners have lost a lot of, you can say, their hope, as you said. I know a few of them have actually shut down their doors permanently. Some guys that have really basically said, that's it, there's nothing I can do. There's guys that are just on the verge, right? They're on the verge, they're just barely staying open. But you know, how do you do that when you're going through your life right now? 2020 for a lot of people is a write-off anyways. They've already said 2020 is a write-off, but then they're also going to spend the next 2 to 3 years trying to catch up to where they were prior to 2020. So there's a lot of despair there as well. But here's why it's important. I think this is what it comes down to, is that it's not just about work, right? It's not just about that. If we take a look at the three buckets are basically your business and your career. You have your relationships in life, and then you have yourself. You have your personal bucket. And I think a lot of people, especially guys, that put so much time, energy, all their eggs into that business and career bucket that they've forgotten the other side. And I basically, you know, this is a similar conversation to someone that I was talking to. One of my clients is, you know, when your relationship isn't going well, and if you're not there from a health perspective, if you're not doing stuff for yourself and you have challenges in your business, you're going to feel down and out. It's like a stool, the three legs on a stool, right? If you don't have those other two legs, you don't have a stool at all. You're just you know, trying to balance on that one little peg. But if you have at least a good relationship with your spouse or even your kids, for example, then at least there's some balance there, or even your personal side. And even within each bucket, Nathan, you should have at least two or three things. So if we take a look at our relationship bucket, a lot of us put a lot of our energy into our spouse, right? But then we also have our children, or we'll put a lot of energy into our children, but maybe the relationship with our spouse isn't there. But then we got to remember the other relationships. What about our friends? What about some of our family members? What about, you know, parents? Whatever that looks like, we should have at least 2 to 3 strong relationships in our life, friendships, whatever it is, that we can depend on. At least we can say, okay, business has gone to crap, right? But at least I have these relationships. And even on the personal side, sorry, you got a question.
Oh, I was just going to say, um, realistically, all of these are relationships. Business is
Mm,
all about relationships. Um, it should be, at least. A lot of,
mm,
I guess there's some people that business is all about just the bottom line. For me, though, everybody that I'm in business with, it's about having a relationship with them. Um, and then the personal aspect is about your relationship with yourself.
mhm.
So really, these three buckets all come down to a type of relationship.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think what you just said is absolutely, uh, it's phenomenal because you're absolutely right because it is relationships. And so how do we identify which relationships to put more effort into? And let's just make it practical. Here's what I would do. I would just create three columns or three buckets or draw it out or however you want to do it and say, what do you have in each bucket? And take a look because I guarantee you're going to look at least one of those buckets and say, crap, it's completely empty. There's nothing there, right? There's some people that just don't either. They don't do anything for themselves. They're in their business. They do stuff for other people. We see that, right? That's people, people with big hearts, but then they tend to neglect themselves and they don't have that energy then when other things don't go well. And I think this is where, again, and part of my book, there's one of the chapters is talking about work-life balance. And I have a tough time with this concept from the perspective of you hear so many differing opinions and viewpoints. You hear people saying, yeah, you need a work-life balance. And then you have other people that say, hey, look, yeah, you know what? Work-life balance doesn't exist anymore with the today's society, with the way we live today. And gone are the days of work-life balance. You just have to accept it. And if you don't accept it, you're not a high performer or whatever that is. I still think that's BS because if you take a look at everything in the world, if you take a look at everything in the universe, what does it do? It goes towards balance. You take a look at energy in your body, for example, your cells, how they operate, anything, electricity, it always goes towards balance. It's one of the fundamental laws of the universe. And so for people that are out there doing all this kind of stuff, you have to have balance. Now, I'm not saying that you can't, there's periods of your time where you put more work in, right, into your work bucket, for example, or you might want to pour more into your relationship bucket, which I find really interesting too. Because if I take a look at the three buckets, Nathan, I don't see a lot of guys, especially high performing guys, putting a lot of, you can say, a higher priority on their relationship than their business.
Mhm.
Typically, if I was to say the ranking, it is it typically the business comes first. That's number one rank. Then you have, because some people like to take care of themselves, they'll work out, they'll learn, they'll do, like we talked about, masterminds and do those kind of stuff. So they're okay on the personal side, the relationships, they're there for their kids. I would say it's depending on the type of person. The other two buckets are kind of even. It's not never going to be perfect for everybody, but I would say they're kind of even. But what if we did something different? What if we for a year said, I'm just going to focus on my relationship the most, right? And maybe put my business on cruise control. I don't know if I'd recommend that, but let's just say maybe I won't have as an aggressive as a growth target. Let's just put it that way, right? Yeah, and just kind of pull it back a little bit, but then spend more time on energy, or sorry, on your relationship. What would that do? I think that would be so phenomenal for people to try that and experiment and see what happens.
I think the reason why is because where we get our self-worth from. A
Yes.
lot of us have been, maybe it's something that happened when we were kids, maybe it's something that happened as we got into the world and realized, man, I really hate working for other people, or whatever the case may be. But a lot of us, we get our value, our self-value, our self-worth from our business. Um the more successful our business is, the more important we feel, the more validated, that's the
Mm,
word, validated, there we
valid.
go. The more validated we feel, the more I mean, everybody can get married and have a wife, but not everybody can run a successful business. It's not real, but that is what I think a lot of us think. And so we don't draw as much of our own personal value from our relationships as we do from our business. um I also think, though, this other one, personal, the personal relationship, the personal bucket, it's one thing that I've seen is a lot of people struggle with the other two because they ignore that one. If you don't spend time reflecting, if you don't spend time trying to figure out why you do the or the unconscious things that you do, why you have the beliefs that you have, um, why it is that you are driven to do these things, if you don't spend time working on that relationship with yourself, it's really hard to have a healthy relationship with your partner, and it's really hard to have a healthy business relationship. So um personally, I think that that one is the one that's the most neglected because people don't realize how much impact it has on the other two.
Yeah, very well said. I think you're bang on because it is fundamentally the core. And again, that's why I'm, it might sound like I'm pitching this book. I'm not actually going to pitch it at this particular time, but I will at some point, right? You're going to hear me talking about it a lot. But that's why I wrote this book, because as a successful CEO, entrepreneur, whoever you are out there, professional, whatever it is that you do, in order to get to that level, you have to have yourself in line first. You have to master yourself first. And you're absolutely right. We have such backward values these days where we say, hey, look, having a Porsche or having this big house or whatever it is, that's a sign of success. Versus, hey, look, I got a good relationship with my kids. I got a good relationship with I'm eating healthy. I'm taking care of my health. I'm reading. I'm educating myself. I'm actually taking time out for myself. It's funny because if you, women tend to do this, because women will tend to, my wife's actually gone on a hiatus today. It's funny. We woke up and she's brushing her teeth and she just starts cracking up. I'm like, what are you laughing about? And she's like, I got a busy day today. And I already knew what she was doing because she's going to the mall. She's got to get her nails done and she's got to do like a whole bunch of other girly stuff, all stuff for herself. And so I laughed. That's why she was cracking up, because she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I got a day full of, do the podcast. I got client meetings. I got all this. She's like, I got a busy day too. So I was just laughing. But I think women tend to take this time out and actually do that stuff for themselves. Right? They end up pampering themselves. If you hear a guy saying, yeah, I'm going to take some time for myself, and you'd be like, what the hell's wrong with you? Right? It's just funny how we take a look at things, but it's so important for us to do. So that just kind of just spurred my moment, because it was just like, yeah, the total contrast between men and women when it comes to that perspective, it's just night and day.
So the male entrepreneur is telling you to take a look at the women in your life and maybe let them lead by example a little bit.
Well, it is. And one of the things too, if we take a look at it, I think there's a feeling of guilt as well with doing stuff for ourselves, right? Because as men, we're taught to be providers. We're the ones that protect the family. It's family first. It's everything about the family.
You're
And
supposed to sacrifice.
yeah, it's a sacrifice. And I sat there and I was thinking too, because I'm on the verge of making a decision. I've always wanted to do my PhD, and I have been researching it. I've talked to some, I want to pick the right program, but I'm like, I'm going to do it because I've always wanted to do it. It's going to take a ton of effort and time, but I'm like, this is something for me more than anything else. And so I just basically made that decision to say, I'm going to do it. And so, but you know what? It was the hardest decision ever, man. I came up with every friggin' single excuse I could have made. Well, what about my business? I'm taking time out of my business, or it's, I'm spending this money on, you can say, practical education, when, what, I know I could learn some real world stuff for next to nothing, or the amount of time I'm going to spend on my, however many hours it is, 25, 30 hours a week. I could be doing more client calls. I could be creating, a mastermind. I could do a course. I could do all this other. I came up with like so many excuses because I felt guilty. I felt guilty for doing something for myself and not productive for somebody else or my family. And that was a real waking call for me, because I'm like, man, this is probably the best time I could do it. Why not do it now?
Yeah. It's so weird, all the stuff that goes on in our head, and when we're trying to figure out which bucket gets which energy. The thing that went off in my brain was, though, is like totally narcissistic, sociopathic, completely selfish people that the only bucket they fill up is their personal bucket. All they do is stuff for themselves, and it's like you said, it's about the balance. I think a lot of times as guys, especially as guys that are high performers and guys that are trying, we look at those selfish things as selfish. We look at, oh, I could get that thing that I really want for myself, but I'd be a complete douchebag. I don't want to be the business owner from America, or the CEO from American Psycho, who's all about vanity and glamour and the fast car and the $3,000 business suit. Like, I don't want to be that guy. And we confuse, I think, the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. We confuse that with being selfish.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I don't think if you're listening to this podcast, for example, I don't think you fall into that category anyways, because I don't think this would be the right fit. Nathan, I used to, maybe it was because it was younger. I used to come across a lot of people that were selfish. And in all honesty, too, there was a point in my life, there was probably a year or two when I was a teenager, that I was like one of those little selfish kids. And I look back, I was so ashamed of that. Like, I just said, like, I want to block that part of my life out, right? Uh, but I don't know if especially guys these days, maybe it's because of my circle and probably even your circle, I don't really run across these super selfish guys anymore. And maybe it's because I totally ignore them and I just don't want to have anything to do with them. But for the vast majority, what I find for guys, I can't say the same for women though. I'm not going to say the same for women. But I will say this for a lot of guys, the vast majority of guys will do things for their family. They'll put their family first. It's everything about their family. Except for one situation, is when they've gotten pissed off by their family, when their relationship isn't good, or they're on the verge of divorce or whatever it is. That's when I see guys shift and say, screw it, I'm going to do stuff for myself. And you know what? My wife comes second or whatever it is, or my kids. I think they're at that point where they're just basically saying, it's not worth it anymore.
Man, okay, we went all over the place with this episode. I think if I could just leave the listener with a takeaway, it would just be what I said earlier: that personal bucket, that personal, your relationship with yourself needs to be strong in order for the other two to be able to really be leveraged. If you want to have a healthy relationship with your family and your significant other, if you want to have healthy business relationships, you really need to spend some time focusing on your relationship with yourself. Anything that you want to leave the listeners with before we're out of here?
Just to tag on to that, one last message I would say is, go out there and do stuff for yourself. Appreciate yourself. Spend on yourself. Enjoy yourself. Go out there and actually enjoy life, and don't just be like those typical guys. And I've fallen in that category myself, where it's like, I have to earn enjoyment. I have to earn giving to myself. I have to do this before I will actually treat myself to something, because you never know how, that day will come. We just don't know when. So treat yourself today. Go out there, do something for yourself today, this week, but just go out there and honestly appreciate yourself. That's my last message.
All right. Awesome. Purdeep, I appreciate you, man. And if people want to check out more episodes of the podcast, where's the best place to go?
2 places, mailpodcast.com and youtubeformen.com.
All right, man. Until next time, we will catch you later.
Take care, man.